Good morning, Rochester. Today it's Friday. Finally Friday, as many people would say. I'm Andy Brownell. This is News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. And it's time for our monthly get-together with the MedCityMovieGuy.com. Chris Miksanek.
Yeah, here I am fading in. Yeah,
there you go. Thank you.
I tell you, we're going to hit the ground running, and I want to borrow from one of my favorite comedians of all time, a guy by the name of Yakov Smirnoff.
Oh, gosh.
And his famous line was, "What a country." So I would say to you, a month ago, you're making fries at McDonald's. Weeks later, you're president of the United States. What a country, right? Where else can that happen? What a country. What a country. Man, that guy, I love that guy. I mean, I think he's somewhere in Missouri now, right, in Branson. But, he was funny. What a country.
Does he have his own little comedy club there on
the
main strip?
He does. Yeah,
he's got.
Yeah, that's like the Yakov Smirnoff Theater. I think it is. I think so. I got to make a note of that. That could be another one of my bucket list items, is to get down.
So does he bring in the likes of Father Guido Sarducci and others?
Oh, that would be epic, wouldn't it? No, I don't think he does. That would be awesome to bring back that whole era of people. You're right. I actually had a close call where I almost sold him one of my jokes. You know, we're going like way off topic here, but so there was a period in the 90s where he was looking for material. And, Yakov pays $50 for jokes. So I wrote 2 jokes, and one of them, they were like, the people who filter all this. One of them was like, yeah, I think this is a good one. I'll propose it to him. And then they came back and said, yeah, he liked it. And if he uses it, you'll get the 50. And evidently he didn't use it. Well, of course, he might have used it for all.
That's why I was going to ask you. How would you ever know?
How would you ever know? Exactly. So I kind of almost want to go see his show just to see if he uses it. And I'm like, hey, you never paid for that one. But anyway, so that was Yakov. But no, we were talking about the election, and one of the things from the election is what I think is the fallout. Reputations were ruined. I mean, people who have no idea of what eggs cost, they have no idea who Peanut the squirrel is. They're talking about how great the last 4 years were. And again, their end of the boat is dry, right? Because they're very insulated from the kinds of things that frustrated half of the country, well, more than half of the country. And so you wonder, George Clooney came out and said, look, I'm officially getting out of politics. I don't think he ever was, but was in it. But, he was definitely a voice for the left, as were, guys like Rob Reiner, who went all in and have gone radio silent. And we talked about Robert De Niro. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of backlash, if any, they face, from fans, because frankly, people are kind of fed up with the politics in general. And I remember there was a movement in the 80s, maybe it was the 90s, this whole shut up and sing, or when these performers first thought, that everybody could benefit from their opinion, if you know what I mean.
Right. And I just spent $200 to go to this show, and I had to listen to you do this for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Right, pontificate. And actually a disappointment in Rochester. Leah Thompson, who's one of the most famous people out of Rochester, was in tears, mind you. I mean, how frail are you that you're in tears? Because her ex-fiance, Dennis Quaid, was supporting the side that she didn't like. So that's
her, and it's her ex.
Yeah, it's her ex. It doesn't say a lot for the...
I've always wondered about this aspect of it, of why the urge to lend your name, because your name is a brand if you're a performer. It's a franchise.
Yes.
And to go out on the limb and throw public support for a politician to the level that they do, I would think that somewhere along the line somebody would be tapping on their shoulder going, he might not want to be that boisterous.
I know, Michael Jordan famously said, Republicans buy my shoes too. And you would think that is the most common sense approach that you could possibly take. But you are among an audience of peers, and then they get the nerve to say, oh, it's just bold to go out on a limb. It's not. First of all, you're not out on a limb when your entire bubble is made up of people who think exactly like you. And I think that's why these celebrities feel empowered. And they feel safe, by the way. They don't feel like it's a risk. I mean, they're not at risk of getting canceled because everybody around them thinks the same way. You know, there's there was a book out a couple years ago, Bernie, what the heck was his name? CBS newscaster, who said he was in the newsroom when Nixon won by a landslide, and everybody there was saying, I can't believe it, because I don't know anybody that voted for Nixon. It's like, he won in a landslide, and you don't know anybody who voted for him. That says a lot about the bubble that you live in, you know. And I think it'll be interesting to see if there's any kind of fallout. I don't think there will be.
No, I don't think so.
You know, at the end of the day, you know, the movie makers are, I don't know, the publicists might be working overtime, but that's about it. And there's also,
I've always been of, you know, either I like your work or I don't like your work. I'm not going to not go see your film because you sided with one candidate or the other. It's just not on my radar.
Yeah, but I mean, there are things that people do wrong that do tarnish their reputation. You know, there's you know, Fatty Arbuckle, for example. You know what I mean? You know, the accusations against him back in the day ruined his career, and obviously Harvey Weinstein as well. So, you know, I mean, sometimes people need to be shunned and canceled, but I think that the craziness that we've seen is a different extreme. You know,
there was something I really wasn't aware of until a few years back, that within Hollywood, there is a, you know, maybe secret is too strong of a word, but a fellowship of conservative thinking people in the entertainment industry.
Right.
And they actually, there's an actual name that they call themselves. They're part of this, you know, it's almost as if when people who are, you know, participants in Alcoholics Anonymous call themselves, you know, Friends of Bill.
Friends of Bill. I think what you're reaching for, I think it's called like the Lincoln Club or something like that.
Something like that.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think that was John Wayne was in it. You know, it's funny because you know what, I could tell you, I'm not. Clint Eastwood told me, don't be a name dropper. No, that's a joke. I never talked to Clint Eastwood, but I always feel guilty when I say this. But John Voight, here I am name dropping. John Voight was kind of standing by himself on a red carpet a couple of years ago, and I went up to him and I said something about, you know, first of all, he's one of the few Catholics in Hollywood, and he told me there's actually a lot of them. You know, they just don't advertise it. They don't brag about it. Just like there's a lot of conservatives in Hollywood. And again, you know, they don't talk about it. They don't brag about it. They just are. So, you know, there's some, you know, that should tell you, at least there's some people who are a little bit more balanced. And then there's a lot of people who are unbalanced, you know, and I mean that pejoratively. But, yeah, so there's a lot of them, you know, and then not that long after I was talking to John Voight, and again, I'm sorry, apologies for the name dropping, but I went over and Mel Gibson was coming by in the other direction because he was pushing the movie, what's it called? Hacksaw Ridge, I think it was called, which is a great movie. Holy cow. And, he was saying, yeah, there's a lot of Catholics, a lot of religious, you know, spiritual people in Hollywood, just, you know, and you don't know it because it seems like the most boisterous people are anti all this stuff. They're very,
that's,
you know,
they're the ones who are going to be quoted.
Exactly. They get a lot of the oxygen in the room, and it's kind of painful when you see somebody like, I miss the sane Rob Reiner, because Rob Reiner directed.
He's a very, very funny guy.
He is, but he's also, I mean, from him we got Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, one of my favorite films, The American President, you know, Michael Douglas. There's been a lot of great things he's done, and what's he going to be remembered for? I don't know, just his hate of somebody else. It's not a legacy that you should really, I don't know. Anyway, but so let's be thankful that Yakov Smirnoff is here.
And we have to take a break. So
I was good.
Just one last thing from the election cycle. It's time for us to turn a page.
Turn a page. That's right.
Sorry, that was a bad joke.
No, it's a great Bob Seger song, though.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll go with that reference. We'll return with the MidCityMovieGuide.com. It's Chris Miksanek. I'm Andy Brownell. This is Rochester Today, News Talk 1340, KROC AM at 96.
Probably.
Welcome back, everyone. The MidCityMovieGuide.com. Chris Miksanek on Rochester Today. Friday morning, I'm Andy Brownell. And, of course, this is News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. Where do you want to go next, Chris?
Well, I always have like events and birthdays that I save for the end, and if we have any time left, and we never seem to because I always run out of time. But there is a local connection here that I want to mention, so I want to get to a couple birthdays today. That's all. One of them's Ed Asner was born today. He wasn't born today, but he was born on this day back in 1929. Ed Asner.
Wow.
An extremely long career. I mean, we know him a lot from TV, things like the Mary Tyler Moore Show he was on, and then later the Lou Grant Show. Of course,
so does that make him 96?
Well, he died a few years ago.
That's right.
So.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
He died in 2021, so he would have been 92? Is it maybe 8 years short of being 100?
Right.
Yeah. So he was
right.
up there.
He became a frequent visitor to Rochester in his final years.
That I was not aware of. That was not the connection I'm working towards. But some of his movies, actually, he's had some really good roles in movies that weren't comedy, kind of his character. So one of the roles he played in Fort Apache, the Bronx. This was a Paul Newman movie, and he was kind of a gruff captain in that. He played himself in a movie, which I love, by the way. It's called Moon Over Parador. And if you've seen it, I don't need to describe it, but basically, it's a wild movie because the dictator in this fictitious country called Parador, Richard Dreyfuss plays the lead. He dies, and they don't yet want to announce that he's dead because they don't have like a plan in place to replace him. So Dreyfuss, who plays he plays an actor in the movie, and he does an impression of the local dictator. So they kind of hire him to play the dictator until they can figure out how to replace him. It's a cool movie. It's a great premise, and there's a lot of cameos in it. One of them is Asner, because Asner is like a famous radical, right? I mean, he supported a lot of causes, especially in Central America. So it was kind of fun to see him kind of in the background in one of the scenes. It was a very, very brilliant cameo. Another film. If I had to make a list of top 10 films, this would be on it. It was JFK. This is the Oliver Stone film. And Asner plays one of the characters. He plays the ex-FBI guy Bannister. But it's a serious role, and it's something you really don't expect from him. And there's a lot of comedians. And Jack Lemmon has a role in there as well with Bannister. So that's Ed Asner. And, of course, he was Santa Claus in Elf. The other birthday of a you won't know the name, but you'll know some of his roles. Actor named Yaphet Kotto. He played in one of my favorite films. It's a Dean Martin movie called Five Card Stud. But he played Dr. Kananga, bad guy, in Live and Let Die.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and he was in The Running Man, and in a great movie, Midnight Run, a very hysterical movie with Robert De Niro. He was the FBI agent Alonzo Mosley. So you know this guy, you don't recognize his name. Anyway, so he passed away a couple of years ago as well, Yaphet Kotto. But here comes the local connection. An actor who you'll say, oh, the name sounds familiar because it's a pretty familiar sounding name. Kevin J. O'Connor. Okay, sounds like, I don't know, hey, I knew a guy named O'Connor. He played. He had a very small role, but he was probably one of the best characters in the 1999 movie The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. I love that movie, by the way. He played Benny, the kind of weaselly little sidekick. If you're not familiar with him, that means you haven't seen the movie, because you would definitely know the character. And if you haven't seen the movie, you have to see it, because as I mentioned on a few occasions, I'm a big fan of the Universal films, Dracula, Mummy, and all that stuff. And this is kind of, I wouldn't call it necessarily a remake, but this is one of the best treatments of the Mummy story. And it's a fun movie. It's an action movie. It's almost like a Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of vibe to it. But anyway, the actor went to the same high school that I went to. in Illinois, in the Chicago area. The suburb was called Burbank, Illinois, St. Lawrence High School. Okay, so that's kind of a local connection. But another famous Rochester person that went to that high school is none other than First Ward City Councilman Patrick Keene. So you know Pat Keene. So he went to the same high school that I did, and also that Kevin J. O'Connor did. So if I said there's a plaque on top of B Wing that Kevin O'Connor donated, Pat Keene would know what I'm talking about. So anyway.
So next time I see Patrick, I'm supposed to go, hey, you went to the same high school with that guy who was in The Mummy.
Yeah, he would know that.
Okay.
And also with the Med City movie guy. Yeah, tell him that. Yeah, no, Pat's a good guy. I talked to him on several occasions. So that's fun stuff. So anyway, those birthdays, I wanted to get those out of there. So let's talk about a couple films that are out.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about three of them, and believe it or not, they all have something in common, and that is that they're animated films. We don't talk a lot about animated films, but there's three of them. Two of them are very similar. One of them not very good, but I want to start out with a franchise that I like a lot because I was introduced to it when my sons were younger, and we watched it. It was a very harmless, nothing objectable. It's exactly the kind of family entertainment that you want available. If you've got kids, it's the Wallace and Gromit series. If you're not familiar with it, Wallace and Gromit, it's like an inventor kind of guy, and then he's got this loyal dog who's like the really the smart one in the family. All right, that's Gromit is the dog. And so there's a new film. It's called Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. So to appreciate it, I think you have to be a Wallace and Gromit fan, and I am. And in this case, it's basically picks up where the 1993 short called The Wrong Trousers left off. And the wrong Trousers introduced a character called Feathers McGraw. He's kind of a penguin who's like a criminal mastermind. And this kind of picks up with that character. So it's a really neat film. And one little side bit about this I got to tell you is Wallace and Gromit in 2005, they had a feature film called The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. It's like a werewolf, but were-rabbit. What I found interesting about that film is we had bought one of those surround sound systems for like the home DVD player.
Sure.
And this was the first film that we watched on that system. And it freaked me out because they were changing the tire on the car. And they'd like throw one of the lug nuts behind them. And literally you kind of hear it bouncing behind you in the speakers. I mean, to me, that's what surround sound is supposed to be. I mean, really immerse you in the experience. I think they've maybe they lost. Not everybody thinks that's cool, by the way. I do, but I think that was really the promise of something like surround sound, that you would hear things behind you to the point where you turn and say, what's going on back there, you know? And anyway, that was Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. So that was obviously a long time ago, 2005. So that's like 20 years ago. But if you've not seen Wallace and Gromit, again, it skews, I think, towards younger people, or certainly young parents. I think it's the kind of content that you can watch, family can watch. So that's pretty neat.
You like that one, okay? But what we should do though is take a break for news and continue with the two other films.
Yep, we'll talk about robots next.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Chris Miksanek, the MedCityMovieGuy.com is with us. I'm Andy Brownell, and we'll return after the news break with more on Rochester Today. News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.
Fleet Farm.
Good morning. Welcome back. Rochester Today, Friday, with Chris Miksanek, the MedCityMovieGuy.com. I'm Andy Brownell on News Talk 1340, KROC AM 96.9 FM. When we took the break, you were ready to talk about two more films out there right now.
I was related to robots. The first one is called, and this was most recently in a theater, it's called A Wild Robot. And
yep, I saw the trailers.
Okay, so, what did you think of it before I just slam
it? To be honest, just not my cup of tea.
Yeah. So the Wild Robot is basically a DreamWorks film, Universal Pictures. So it's like Pixar creates a lot of stuff. DreamWorks creates a lot of animation as well. And it's basically a robot gets marooned on this island and is accidentally energized, turned on, and then becomes a little bit of a savior to some of the animal characters, I guess I'd call them. One of them is a gosling that the robot raises, and sort of takes on some human characteristics, and this and that. I got to tell you, I didn't love this movie. I think it's the kind of thing where, if you're looking for something else to get, to watch, it's kind of harmless in that case. But it seemed like it had like a darker theme to it.
Huh.
So I think if I was, if I had very little kids, it seemed darker than a lot of films. I will tell you though, if you're looking for a robot film, and I think I might have mentioned this once before, but it's worth bringing up again. There was another film released this year. It was actually originally a French, or I think it was a Spanish film. It's called Robot Dreams. And this one did very well earlier in the year. And I think if I talked about this before, I said I fell in love with this one in the first 5 minutes. It's really the coolest film that I've seen in years. It is
subtitled?
Well, no, there's no talking at all. It's about a dog and his robot. And that's what's brilliant about it. And there's just a vibe that's so comfortable. It's so pleasant. It's basically this dog is bored. You see him. It's all totally pop culture. So he's playing Pong with himself. There's a reference to White Castle hamburgers. This one goes back a long ways. Remember STP, the oil treatment?
Yeah.
Goes back to that. So there's a lot of that. And then he orders this robot and becomes kind of a pal of his. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that something, if I want to find it's out there on the...
Yes. This is exactly,
or whatever you want to call it.
I like the Streamosphere. Yes, if you want it, you will find it. And I think the overall theme of this one is loyalty. I'll just leave you with that, loyalty. But again, it's just a real pleasant film, and it's just very cool. And so if you're looking for robot
films,
if you're looking for robot films, and there's been a couple of them over the years. I mean, we won't go back over a lot of science fiction oriented ones, but I would say pass on the Wild Robot and track down Robot Dreams.
The thing with robots too is you look at the technological advancements that are being made with this artificial intelligence, and also the I guess biomechanics they're capable of now. It's getting creepily close to reality.
Yeah, it is. It is. It wasn't that long ago where, if you had a robot, it maybe came out and brought you a cocktail or something. But you're right. And the artificial intelligence, there's something called a Turing test, which if you're in a computer science, you know about. It's like, can I, if I was on the other end of a phone, right, could this person fool me into thinking this was right? And I think closer and closer, you're getting some of that. I think AI has a ways to go, before we get to that point. But when you see things like the little robotic dogs that are out keeping, the perimeter safe and checking out, for security and things like that, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Well, they even have them now for comfort. That those, they're toys essentially. But they'll sit on your lap and they'll mimic, the facial expressions of a real animal.
Yeah.
And it's, like I say, it's creepily close.
Now see that's the line I think people have to be careful to cross, because there was some animation where the animation was so good in terms of accuracy of looking like people that it freaked people out. Because it didn't look like animated people. It looked too much like real people. And there was something just a little off about it that really turned people off. And they said, maybe we have to, pull it back a notch or two, because it just didn't look right. But
before we move on, I'm going to go back to the other robot one that you kind of about.
Yeah.
I will say the kids next door who range in age, let's say, 6 to 10, they loved it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think they were already into the storyline from. Was there a previous movie?
Well, there was a book
featuring.
Yeah, so it's based on a book, that 2016 book. So that could be a big part of it. Yeah. And you're right. There's some things that I don't necessarily feel qualified to talk to. Like the Twilight series. It's like, this is a series that's really intended for girls, and what do I have to say about it?
Yeah, you're not even close to the demographic.
No, I'm not. But I mean, I did cover it because, and I did that I talked to, like, I think there was a teen girl that was working at the theater. I'm like, so what's the deal with this? Oh, let me tell you about it all. So it became more of a report, you see, than it was a criticism or anything. Yeah. Because I'm like, what do I have to say about it? That's why I kind of stay away from those kinds of things. There was a couple of movies too where I said, I didn't get it, but I heard a lot of giggling behind me. So I know that they were, turning the ear of a certain demographic. So you're right. So there you go.
If you had asked my folks what they thought of Caddyshack, they would have been a different opinion than mine.
That's a perfect example, because Caddyshack's one of the funniest movies of all time. They probably would not agree.
No, they would not have appreciated the humor.
No, they would not.
Well, let's take a quick break.
All right.
Chris Miksanek, he is TheMedCityMovieGuy.com, and this is Rochester Today on Newstalk 1340, KROC AM at 96. Welcome back, Rochester Today with TheMedCityMovieGuy.com. It's Chris Miksanek on Newstalk 1340, KROC AM at 96.9 FM. What's our... No, go ahead.
No, I can't. You told me not to talk about that. No, I'm just joking. So, two retirements that I wanted to talk about. This is kind of sad because, we were talking earlier about, do we have the kind of gravitas, of this new generation of actors, maybe in the last 15 years. And I don't think we do, but, because we're losing two perfect examples I'm about to tell you. The first one is Liam Neeson. He says he's ready to retire from action movies. And that's a big loss because, I mean, he's done some great things. We'll talk about that in a second. And the other one who's talking about retiring is Denzel Washington, who's... Oh, really? I mean, and I'm a huge fan of Denzel.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Some of his movies have been the best movies I've seen.
Right, and we'll come back to that, but that's in relation to Gladiator 2, which is his latest film that's out right now. Actually, no, I think it opens this week or next week. But anyway, Gladiator 2 is, and they say Denzel's the best part of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But the thing that I wanted to talk about were some of their films. So, Liam Neeson, one of his earlier roles is a film that I never get tired of talking about because so many people don't know it. It's a film called Leap of Faith. And this was a film in the early 90s before Liam Neeson was big, and it's a very small role he has. He plays like the sheriff. It's a Steve Martin movie, and that's also a role that you wouldn't expect from Steve Martin because he plays one of these like traveling evangelists where they have these like tent shows where, the faith healers and all this. So
I'm pretty sure I have seen this film.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it or seen it lately, you should check it out because it's a real satisfying film for a lot of reasons. I'll just leave it at that. So Leap of Faith. And then, of course, Liam Neeson's probably what his biggest role was Schindler's List, right? So could you imagine having something like that on your resume, Schindler's List? And then a couple years later, Rob Roy, which was another great film. And, of course, he was in Star Wars as well. And one of my favorite movies. Well, okay, first of all, he was in Taken. Most people think of him as in Taken. But I like some of his smaller roles. And he had a very small role, but an important role in Gangs of New York. This was the Scorsese film with Leonardo DiCaprio.
One of my favorites ever.
I know. And, when I first saw that movie, I was in the mob movies and stuff. So the first time I saw it, I was like very disappointed because it had nothing to do with gangs. I mean, at least in terms of the mob. But when I went back, when I read the book, Herbert Asbury wrote the book, Gangs of New York. I went back, I read the book, and I went back and I saw the movie with a different set of eyes. And it's a fascinating movie because it's a slice of history that we don't always think about. And this is like the Civil War was going on. And, when we think of the old days. Maybe it's a turn of the century, but this particular part of history with the draft riots and things that were going on at the time, we don't really think about. And this is almost an era, and they even deal with this at the end of the film, but this is an era that is almost erased from our history. So, again, if you haven't seen it, definitely it's something you should see. It's one of Martin Scorsese's best films. And of course, Denzel, holy cow. I mean, I don't even know where to start. My favorite Denzel movie, I don't have a favorite. I've got like 5 favorites, but Man on Fire is probably one of his best roles. It's just so gritty. There's a few cameos that are in it, but he's basically a bodyguard for a little girl down in Mexico where kidnapping is a side business. It's a side hustle. You know, people get kidnapping insurance. They get somebody in their family kidnapped, and then they pay the ransom, and everybody's happy, you know, except when things go bad, and that's where he's involved. Training Day, I think he won a Academy Award for that. It's probably one of the most gritty roles anybody's ever played on a big screen. Pelican Brief, Malcolm X was a great role. He was in one of his earliest roles, Glory, American Gangster, and another.
I loved American Gangster. I thought
American Gangster
movie was brilliant.
It was great. It was brilliant. It was all those things. It was based on a true story, which always makes things kind of interesting too, because you want to go out and learn more about some of these characters. But I think one of my favorite performances of his, and one of my favorite movies in general, because I like Gene Hackman, is called Crimson Tide. Have you heard about this movie?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's basically mutiny on a nuclear equipped submarine.
Yep.
I mean, and there's a lot of great performances, but Gene Hackman's is probably, it might be one of his career best, and Denzel, of course, is his executive on board. So he's it's great as they battle each other on whether, just so everybody understands, the concept is that they're told they have to launch a preemptive strike, and then they lose communication. So it's all about, do we follow through with the last order, or do we wait for confirmation and things like that. So it's some really intense drama. Great film. So 2 talents that we'll lose, but the beauty of it is their contributions are going to be around on DVD shelves forever.
Yeah, but you'll miss the next Denzel film. You mentioned he's in the new Gladiator.
Gladiator 2, that's right.
Yeah, and okay, to be honest, watching the trailers, I don't know if I'll see it.
I'll definitely see it. It opens actually next weekend. I will see it. And as I said, I'm told that he's the best part of it. He plays, one of the Roman leaders, I suppose. And
sure.
Yeah, I'll see it because I like that kind of thing. What they call sword and sandal kind of films. I think.
Yeah,
what they call
a lot of folks do. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to. I think we have a few minutes left. I want to talk about some upcoming stuff. In addition
we're heading
to that,
into that season where we should be seeing some really good product, right? It's almost the holidays.
Well, see, that's kind of what we talked about. Is this year has not been a great one, and one of the Christmas offerings. And you'll think this is funny in an ironic way. There's a remake of Nosferatu opening this Christmas. So I'm like, I think the studios have just given up on like what normal people want these days, right? I mean, I can't believe that. That's kind of a surprise. So that one's coming out. Gladiator is coming out. The Wicked movie's apparently it's kind of a big deal. I'm not a fan of the play. Wicked is, I don't know if I'd call it the backstory or the prequel to Wizard of Oz.
Sure, it's the story of the witches.
Right. So it's a very popular Broadway play, and now it's going to be a movie. So we'll see. I mean, there's out of the gate. I've actually heard somebody say, based on really what's available, this could be an award contender, which says a lot about how little there really was for competition. One of the films that I think just opened a couple of days ago and did really well at the box office, it's called The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. And
I've heard the ads.
Right. And this is the kind of film that you expect at a holiday time. Straight up family entertainment, has great reviews. I'm going to say it this week, but it's directed by Dallas Jenkins, who's the guy behind all the episodes of The Chosen, Angel Studios, that guy. So I think that'll do, well, it has already done really well, and it's just opened, like I said, a few days ago. So that's on my list. I think the big one, there's two big ones that are coming up. The one is going to get released after the end of the year. But the first one is called A Complete Unknown. Now, we talked about this before, right? This is the Bob Dylan story.
Oh, yeah. I've seen the trailers on this. This looks good.
Yeah, and you're right. It's, if you've seen the trailers, I don't think they deal with his earliest days in Hibbing, right? Hibbing, Minnesota.
And Duluth.
In Duluth. I don't think they deal with that. It kind of starts with him coming to New York. But you're right. Every trailer I've seen says this is going to be kind of cool. I mean, it's might not be exactly like Walk the Line, but then again, it might. So I think that'll be. I think a lot of people are looking forward to that. The actor Timothy Chalamet is a pretty popular actor. So we'll see. I think it's going to be Edward Norton, Elle Fanning. I think it's going to be pretty big. But again, when I say big, it's relative to what else is coming out this year. The one I'm most looking forward to is called Waltzing with Brando. This is okay. basically the Marlon Brando story. But it was at the Cannes Film Festival this year, but I don't think it's going to get released in time for the awards consideration. But if you've seen the trailer, it is like totally wild. I mean, you think it's going to be about Brando's career, about The Godfather, because they've leaked some photos and little bits of it, and he does a great job channeling the actor. His name's Billy Zane. He does a great job channeling Brando. Looks a lot like him in these roles, but it seems like the premise is him trying to build this. I don't know what I call it, his retreat in the Tahitian Islands, right? So what happened was Brando, when he was filming Mutiny on a Bounty a long time ago, he fell in love with this area in Tahiti and came and bought some property there, bought an island there. And this film seems to concern itself mostly with him building his home there. There's no running water, no clean water, and how's he going to do all this stuff? And maybe he's going to turn it into a resort to help pay for it and stuff like that. And they just show him, on a bulldozer and stuff. The kind of thing you would think is typical, maybe, or atypical, but you would think of Brando. So it'll be interesting. Billy Zane is an actor. I guess he's pretty popular. I don't think he's been in a lot of things that you and I have seen, but he's popular in the scene of Hollywood. So a lot of people are pals with him. He was, I think, most famously, he was the bad guy in the movie Titanic, right? So he was the husband, and then he had a small role in Tombstone as well. But this will be a big one. Waltzing with Brando. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So timing's perfect. It's almost time to, what do we do at the end of the program?
We fade to black.
Okay, got that out of the way. Chris, thanks a lot. I look forward to catching up with you next month and talking more about movies.
Okay, sounds good.
He is Chris Miksanek, the MedCityMovieGuide.com. Remember the website. I'm Andy Brownell, and it's Rochester Today, News Talk 1340, KROC AM at 96.